Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was nearly destroyed in one. Not by a foreign enemy, but by its own champions. I'm going to take you back to a time when the Roman Republic, the mighty superpower of the Mediterranean, was already beginning to crack from the inside. Not because of famine or weakness, but because of ambition. Two men, both brilliant, both popular, both believing they alone could save Rome, would instead tear it apart. One of them was Gaius Julius Caesar, a man who conquered Gaul, charmed the Roman masses, and walked with destiny like it was his shadow. The other was Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey the Great, a celebrated general, loved by the Senate, and the symbol of traditional Roman values. They started as allies, then became rivals, and finally, enemies. What unfolded next wasn't just a political dispute, it was one of the most brutal civil wars in Roman history. Brother against brother, senator against senator. It would end with a river crossed, a republic strangled, and one man holding the keys to an empire. This is the story of how Rome stopped being a republic and started becoming an empire. This is the story of Caesar against Pompey. Who was Caesar? The rise of a revolutionary. Before he was Caesar the conqueror, he was Caesar the outsider. Born in 100 BCE to a patrician family that had lost much of its influence, Julius Caesar wasn't supposed to be important. He wasn't rich. He didn't come from the inner circle of power. In fact, he was nearly executed as a teenager when he refused to divorce his wife at the dictator Sulla's command. But Caesar had something no one could take from him: vision. He believed in his destiny. While others chased titles, Caesar chased history. He was obsessed with Alexander the Great, often saying that by his age, Alexander had conquered the world, and he, Caesar, had done nothing. He would change that. He began with words, becoming one of Rome's greatest orators. Then he won respect as a fearless military leader in Asia and Hispania. He was captured by pirates once, and when they demanded a ransom, he joked that he was worth more. When freed, he hunted them down and crucified them, just as he promised. That's who Caesar was: bold, unafraid, brilliant, dangerous. But it wasn't just courage that made him rise, it was strategy. Caesar understood people. He gave public games, reduced debts, and spoke directly to the common man. While the Senate laughed, the people cheered. By 60 BCE, Caesar had climbed Rome's political ladder: praetor, consul, governor, and he was just getting started. He wasn't just trying to gain power. He was trying to reshape Rome itself, break the old systems, challenge the elites, and build something new. And that terrified the Senate. They saw him not as a savior, but as a threat. And they were right. Pompey the Great, champion of the Republic. Before Caesar rose, Pompey was the man. His full name was Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, but history remembers him simply as Pompey the Great. He earned that title not through words, but through victories. By the age of 24, he was already commanding legions. He had crushed rebellions, chased down pirates across the Mediterranean, and defeated Mithridates, one of Rome's most dangerous enemies. He marched through the east like Alexander himself, annexing entire regions into Roman provinces. To the Senate, he was a hero. To the people, a savior. To Caesar, a future rival. But Pompey didn't start as Caesar's enemy. In fact, they were once allies. Along with the wealthy Crassus, Pompey and Caesar formed the first triumvirate, a private agreement to dominate Roman politics. Pompey brought military prestige, Crassus brought wealth, and Caesar brought popularity with the people. Together they ruled Rome from the shadows. But shadows don't last. Crassus died in battle in 53 BCE, leaving Pompey and Caesar face to face. The Senate began whispering in Pompey's ear. They reminded him of the Republic, of tradition, of order. They warned that Caesar was growing too strong, too bold. And slowly, Pompey changed, from ally to guardian, from friend to threat. While Caesar was off conquering Gaul, Pompey stayed in Rome, consolidating power. He married into the Senate's circles, took command of Rome's forces, and by the time Caesar looked south from Gaul, Pompey was no longer an ally. He was the wall that Caesar would have to break if he wanted Rome. The crossing of the Rubicon. January 49 BCE, the river Rubicon, a quiet stream, a line in the dirt, a border not of geography, but of fate. Caesar stood at its edge, knowing exactly what it meant. If he crossed it with his army, he would be labeled a traitor, an enemy of the state. It was treason, it was war. But if he didn't, he would return to Rome alone, powerless, at the mercy of his enemies. Pompey had taken command of the Republic's legions. The Senate, filled with Caesar's rivals, demanded he disband his army and return as a civilian. It was a trap. Caesar knew it. His enemies didn't want justice. They wanted revenge. So he made his choice. He crossed. "The die is cast," he said. The news hit Rome like thunder. Panic, fear, betrayal. The Senate had never imagined Caesar would actually do it. They thought he would back down. Instead, he marched, fast and furious, down through Italy, gaining support with every town he entered. He promised no looting, no punishment, only restoration of dignity, and the people believed him. Pompey fled. Along with most of the Senate, he abandoned Rome, heading south to regroup in Greece. They didn't stay to fight. Not yet. Not in Italy. They needed time, troops, strategy. But the message was clear. This was no longer a political feud. This was civil war. The race for Greece. With Rome now in Caesar's hands, Pompey made his stand in Greece. He had the support of the Senate. He had fleets, gold, and powerful allies in the east. By contrast, Caesar had only what he could bring with him, a loyal army, low on supplies, but high on belief. Caesar didn't wait for his full fleet. He took only a portion of his legions across the Adriatic, braving dangerous waters and dodging Pompey's naval patrols. A bold move, but a risky one. He made it to the coast of Epirus, but now he was stranded. Pompey controlled the seas, and Caesar, he was alone. Supplies dwindled, hunger grew, the elements battered his men. In desperation, Caesar sent scouts to cut through Pompey's lines and reach reinforcements. It worked, but barely. Meanwhile, Pompey sat still, watching, waiting, and planning. He had the upper hand. Caesar was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and trapped on foreign soil. But what Pompey didn't realize was that Caesar thrived in desperation. In a war of speed, boldness, and surprise, Caesar was second to none. And when his reinforcements finally arrived, the chessboard was set. Greece was no longer a sanctuary. It was the battleground. The stage was ready for the showdown the Republic had feared. Caesar versus Pompey. Not in words, but in war. The Battle of Dyrrhachium. The port of Dyrrhachium, Pompey's stronghold in western Greece, became the focus of Caesar's next move. But this wasn't just a siege. This was Caesar trying to out Pompey. Rather than charge the city directly, Caesar built a wall around Pompey's camp. Yes, you heard that right. He tried to trap Pompey's forces inside their own stronghold by encircling them with trenches, ramparts, and watchtowers. It was audacious, dangerous, classic Caesar. But Pompey wasn't idle. With superior numbers and fresh supplies coming in from the sea, he bided his time. And then he struck. In July 48 BCE, Pompey launched a surprise breakout. His cavalry overran Caesar's right flank. Caesar's men, starved and stretched thin, began to falter. For the first time in the war, Caesar lost. His lines broke. His army retreated. Hundreds of his men were cut down as they fled toward the hills. It was chaos. For a moment, the tide had turned. Pompey had him. Right there. He could have ended the war. But instead, he hesitated. Instead of pressing the advantage, Pompey pulled back. Some say he feared a trap. Others say he wanted to preserve Roman lives. But whatever the reason, it was a mistake. Caesar regrouped. He didn't waste time licking his wounds. He turned south, deeper into Greece. If he couldn't win at Dyrrhachium, he'd fight Pompey somewhere else. Somewhere like Pharsalus. The Battle of Pharsalus. August 9th, 48 BCE, Pharsalus. The sun rose over the dry plains of central Greece, and with it, the fate of the Roman Republic. Caesar's army stood outnumbered, exhausted, low on food. Pompey's legions were well-fed, well-rested, and confident. This was supposed to be an easy win, a formality, but Caesar was never predictable. He positioned his men carefully, 3 lines deep, but hidden behind his cavalry, he placed a secret weapon, a 4th line of infantry, hand-picked veterans, silent, still, waiting. The battle began with cavalry. Pompey's horsemen, his pride and joy, charged in full force. Caesar's own cavalry gave ground, retreating, drawing Pompey's forces in. And then, the 4th line moved. They surged forward, attacking Pompey's cavalry from the side with javelins and short swords. The charge collapsed. The flank buckled. Suddenly, Pompey's entire right wing was exposed. Caesar didn't hesitate. He unleashed the full weight of his legions. The center crumbled. Pompey's lines disintegrated, and just like that, the greatest general of the Republic, broke ranks and fled the field. His camp was overrun, his men slaughtered or captured. Caesar walked through the wreckage, stunned. He had won, against the odds, against the numbers, against the expectations. And Rome would never be the same. Pompey's flight and fall. Pompey fled east, not to regroup, not to fight another day. He fled to Egypt, once a friend of Rome, now ruled by a boy king and a divided court. He hoped for sanctuary. He got betrayal. Egypt was in chaos. Young Ptolemy the 13th ruled in name, but real power lay with his advisors, men desperate to impress Caesar, the new master of the Mediterranean. They saw Pompey as a bargaining chip, or worse, a threat. So when Pompey arrived on the shores of Egypt, they greeted him with smiles and swords. He was murdered as he stepped off the boat, a Roman consul, a hero of the Republic, cut down like a criminal by foreign hands. When Caesar arrived days later, the Egyptians proudly presented him with Pompey's severed head. But Caesar did not smile. He wept. He ordered a proper Roman funeral for his former friend, his rival, his son-in-law. Because in the end, Pompey was Rome, and Rome deserved better. The great struggle between Caesar and Pompey was over. But what followed would shake the world even more. Egypt, Cleopatra, and Caesar's next move. Caesar didn't come to Egypt looking for a queen, but that's what he found. When he stepped into Alexandria, he found a city divided. The boy king Ptolemy the 13th ruled on paper, but his sister Cleopatra had other plans. Exiled, brilliant, and fiercely ambitious, Cleopatra knew that Caesar held the key to her survival. So she gambled everything. Legend says she smuggled herself into Caesar's presence, rolled in a carpet. When it unfurled, there she was, draped in silk, radiant with confidence. Caesar was amused and intrigued. He backed her claim to the throne. What followed was not just an affair, it was a war. Ptolemy's forces rioted. The streets of Alexandria burned. The Library of Alexandria was lost to the flames. But Caesar held the line. He defeated Ptolemy's army in brutal urban combat. And when the smoke cleared, Cleopatra was queen. Together they ruled Egypt for a time. She bore him a son, Caesarion, whom she claimed was Caesar's heir. To the Roman Senate, this was dangerous. To Caesar, it was destiny. But Rome was calling. Caesar had settled Egypt's throne, but the Republic was still on fire. Enemies waited, daggers sharpened, and Caesar, ever the visionary, had already begun to imagine something more than Rome. He dreamed of an empire. Caesar returns to Rome. Caesar came back to Rome not as a general, but as a god. He had crushed his enemies, brought Cleopatra to his side, restored order in the East. Now he walked through the gates of the eternal city not as a man of the people, but as its master. The crowds roared. The temples rang with music. For his victories, he was granted 4 triumphs, ceremonial processions usually reserved for once-in-a-lifetime achievements. Caesar had 4. Prisoners of war marched in chains. Exotic animals, foreign gold. Senators watched in silence as Rome itself bowed. But behind the cheers, there was fear. Caesar dressed not in a simple toga, but in royal purple. He sat on a golden throne. He placed his own statue among the gods. He even minted coins with his face, a thing no Roman had dared to do in a republic. He claimed it was all for Rome, to restore glory, to rebuild peace, and many believed him. But others whispered in alleyways and atriums, "Is this man a liberator or a king?" In a republic that had slain tyrants for centuries, that question was dangerous. Caesar's power was absolute, his popularity unmatched, his vision grand. But somewhere in the Senate, a blade was already being drawn, the Ides of March. He had crossed the Rubicon. He had chased Pompey across the world. He had stood beside Cleopatra. He had returned to Rome as its unrivaled ruler. But not even Caesar could conquer destiny. It was March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March. A soothsayer had warned him. Beware the Ides of March. Caesar laughed. The Senate awaited. He ignored the signs. He arrived at the Theater of Pompey, a building named after the man he had defeated. How fitting. He entered the Senate chamber, and the blades came out. More than 60 senators, men who had once called him friend, ally, savior, stabbed him again and again. Not in the back, but in the front, face to face. They wanted him to see it. According to legend, when Brutus, his protege, struck him, Caesar uttered 3 words that echoed through time. Et tu, Brute? Then fell silence. The man who had risen from obscurity, reshaped the republic, and dreamt of an empire, lay dead on the floor surrounded by the men he once trusted. They thought they were saving the republic. They thought the nightmare was over. They were wrong. Aftermath and legacy. The conspirators expected celebration. Instead, they got chaos. Rome didn't cheer Caesar's death. It mourned. People wept in the streets. Crowds howled as they saw his wounds, laid bare by Mark Antony, who gave the most famous speech of his life. Antony read Caesar's will aloud. To the people, he had left gardens. To every citizen, he left money. The assassins had not killed a tyrant. They had martyred a father of Rome. The city boiled with rage. Riots broke out. The Senate trembled. Brutus and Cassius fled east. Their freedom had unleashed the opposite. And then came Octavian, Caesar's great-nephew. Young, calculating, named heir in Caesar's will. He allied with Antony and Lepidus, forming the Second Triumvirate. Together they hunted down Caesar's killers and defeated them at the Battle of Philippi. But peace never lasts in Rome. Antony and Octavian turned on each other, and the next great civil war began. Eventually, Octavian would emerge victorious, crush Antony and Cleopatra, and become Augustus, Rome's first emperor. The Republic? It died with Caesar. What was born in its place was something new, something powerful, something eternal. The Roman Empire. Reflections on power, loyalty, and destiny. So what did it all mean? Was Caesar a tyrant or a savior? Was Pompey a patriot or a man too proud to bend? Did Brutus defend liberty or murder hope? The truth is, Rome was dying long before the first blade was drawn. Corruption, inequality, endless war, they rotted the republic from within. Caesar and Pompey weren't the disease. They were the symptoms. Two giants, one republic, no space for both. In the end, loyalty shattered, not just between friends, but between a people and their system. Caesar crossed the Rubicon, but Rome had crossed its own long before. From its ashes, a new order rose, the empire. Glorious, powerful, inevitable. But in that final moment, as Caesar fell, perhaps he too realized that power gained through ambition often ends in betrayal. And yet his name lives on, Caesar, a title that became Kaiser, then Tsar. His story echoed in every ruler who would follow. Because the Roman Civil War wasn't just a battle for land, it was a battle for the soul of a civilization, and that makes it timeless. If you love this video, don't stop here. Like the video to support independent history content. Comment below with your thoughts or questions. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives, and most importantly, share it with your friends and family. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.